r/NoSleep. The Library of the Forgotten. There's an old library in my town that everyone seems to have forgotten about. Tucked away at the end of an overgrown road, hidden by tall, swaying trees, it's been abandoned for decades, or so people say. Its reputation is one of disrepair and neglect, yet something about it felt like it was just waiting for someone to notice it again. When I found the job posting for a night librarian in the classifieds, I was startled. I hadn't even thought the place was still in operation. The listing was short but strange: night librarian needed. Must follow strict rules. No mention of pay, benefits, or even the name of the employer. Just those two sentences in bold, sitting in the middle of a mostly blank page in the newspaper. My first instinct was to skip over it, but as I scanned the rest of the ads, nothing came close to paying the bills that had piled up. My last job at the gas station had ended in a fiery disaster when the place mysteriously burned down in the middle of the night, leaving me without income or prospects. So I called the number. An old man answered, his voice thick and scratchy like gravel being stirred in a metal bucket. "You're calling about the position?" "Yes, sir," I replied. "I'd like to apply." Silence. The kind of silence that makes you check your phone to see if the call has dropped, but just before I could say something else, he spoke again. "You'll need to meet me at the library tonight, 8 p.m. sharp. Don't be late." The line went dead before I could respond. The library was even more decrepit than I imagined, tucked into a forgotten corner of town, hidden by towering, ancient oaks and underbrush that seemed eager to reclaim the land. The sign above the door read Redwood Library, though the paint had peeled and faded so much that the letters were barely legible. Vines coiled around the building like snakes, creeping into cracks in the stone and disappearing into the broken windows. I checked my watch. 7:58 p.m. The air around the place felt heavy, thick with moisture, and something else, something that made my skin tingle with unease. Still, I couldn't afford to back out. I needed the job. The door creaked open before I even reached it, and standing in the doorway was the old man from the phone. His face was as ancient as the building itself, his eyes deep-set and hollow, skin thin and paper-like. He didn't say anything, just waved for me to follow him inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the temperature plummeted. It felt like stepping into a freezer, the chill biting into my skin despite the sweltering heat outside. The smell hit me next, a mixture of dampness, dust, and something else. Something faintly metallic, like rust or old blood. The interior of the library was a labyrinth of towering shelves, each packed with books that looked as old and forgotten as the building itself. The dim lighting flickered occasionally, casting long, shifting shadows across the floor. We walked in silence until we reached a large wooden desk near the back, where the old man handed me a single sheet of paper. "These are the rules," he said, his voice low and raspy, like the last breath of someone who had forgotten how to speak. "Follow them." "Exactly. If you break them, you won't leave here the same. If you leave at all." I swallowed hard and took the paper. The rules were typed in small, cramped letters. 1. Always enter the library by 8 p.m. sharp. Never arrive later, and never leave before 4 a.m. The doors will lock themselves, and you don't want to be caught outside. 2. Don't answer the phone. If it rings, let it ring. No one is calling you. 3. You'll see a man in a black suit sitting at a table in the far corner. He'll be there every night. Ignore him. Don't speak to him, and don't make eye contact. 4. Every night at exactly 12:12 a.m., a woman in a red dress will walk through the aisles. Stay behind the desk until she leaves. No matter what she says, don't follow her. 5. You'll hear whispers coming from the history section around 1 a.m. Don't go looking for them. 6. The basement is off limits. Never go down there. 7. At 3:03 a.m., the lights will flicker. When they do, close your eyes and count to 10. When you open them, make sure nothing is standing in the aisle in front of you. 8. There's a book with a black cover and no title on the third shelf in the horror section. It will appear in front of you, even if you don't seek it out. Whatever you do, do not open it. I felt a chill crawl down my spine as I read the rules. They seemed absurd, like something out of a horror movie, but the old man was watching me with those cold, dead eyes, and something in his gaze made me believe he wasn't joking. "Do you understand?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. "Good," he said, and without another word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone in the vast, silent library. The first night was unnerving, but uneventful. I followed the rules to the letter. The phone rang twice, but I didn't pick it up. The man in the black suit sat at his table, staring straight ahead, never moving. When the woman in the red dress appeared, she floated between the shelves, her footsteps unnervingly soft, but I stayed behind the desk as instructed. The whispers from the history section were faint, almost imperceptible, like the wind passing through cracks in the walls, but I resisted the urge to investigate. At 3:03 a.m., the lights flickered, and my heart raced. I closed my eyes, counted to 10, and when I opened them, the aisle in front of me was empty. By 4 a.m., I was out of the library, breathing a sigh of relief as I stepped into the cool night air. But as I walked to my car, something felt wrong. I glanced behind me and realized that the dirt path I had just walked on was smooth, no footprints. It was as if I hadn't been there at all. The second night was worse. The phone rang constantly, louder each time, until the sound drilled into my skull like a jackhammer. I ignored it, but it felt like the noise was chasing me through the empty library. The man in the black suit was still there, but this time I swore I saw him move, just a slight tilt of the head, barely perceptible, but enough to send my heart into overdrive. When the woman in the red dress appeared, she stopped in the middle of the aisle, directly in front of my desk. Her back was turned to me, but I could see her long, dark hair cascading down her back like a curtain. She didn't move for several minutes, just stood there, perfectly still, and I could feel her waiting for me to make a mistake. Finally, she walked away, disappearing into the shelves without a sound. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I had been holding, my hands shaking as I gripped the edge of the desk. The whispers were louder that night, too. They were no longer faint murmurings in the distance, they were right behind me, hissing my name in the dark. At 3:03 a.m., the lights flickered, and this time, when I opened my eyes, there was something standing at the far end of the aisle. It was tall, taller than any human should be, with limbs that were too long, too thin, and a face that was blurred, like a smudged painting. It didn't move, just stood there, watching me with those hollow, sunken eyes. I don't know how long I stared at it, frozen in place, but eventually, the figure melted into the shadows, leaving me alone in the flickering light. I didn't sleep when I got home. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the thing standing at the end of the aisle, waiting for me to look away. The third night was the worst. The phone didn't just ring, it screamed. The sound was so loud, so piercing, that I thought my ears would bleed. I covered my head with my arms, but it did nothing to muffle the noise. It was like the sound was coming from inside my skull, reverberating through my bones. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the ringing stopped. The silence that followed was so thick, so oppressive, that it made my skin crawl. I looked up, and there she was, the woman in the red dress. But this time, she was standing behind the desk, right next to me. Her face was pale, her eyes nothing but dark, empty sockets, and she was smiling, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far across her face. "Follow me," she whispered, her voice soft but insistent. I shook my head, backing away. "No," I muttered. "I can't." Her smile faltered, and her face twisted in rage, her features contorting into something monstrous. "Follow me," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the library like a death knell. I turned and ran, darting between the shelves, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear her footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, her voice following me through the dark. Finally, I reached the fiction section and hid behind a shelf, my breath coming in ragged gasps. For what felt like hours, I listened to her footsteps, her voice calling my name, growing fainter and fainter until it disappeared completely. I didn't go back to the desk that night. I stayed hidden until 4 a.m., and when I finally left the library, I swore I would never go back. But the next night, the black book appeared on my nightstand. I hadn't gone looking for it. I hadn't even been near the library. But there it was, waiting for me. I don't know how it got there. I don't know what will happen if I open it. But I'm terrified to find out. I've thought about quitting, but the old man's words echo in my mind: you don't quit Redwood Library. You either follow the rules, or you become one of the stories. And the stories in this library never have happy endings.